Hey guys, welcome back or welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about the 5 things I learned buying my new John Deere 3035D tractor. Let's take a look. Alright, so before you invest any time watching my video, what are the 5 things I'm going to tell you about? Well, those 5 things are research, number 1, new versus used is number 2, cash versus financing, number 3, is this an in-person or a technology-driven industry at this point is number 4, and finally the concept of bundling. So if you're interested in hearing about that, let's get going. All right guys, so for the first thing, I can't really say this is something I learned, but it's something that is applicable to just about everything, and that's before you go out and start looking, do your research. So make sure you know not only what you think you want, but what you need. So I determined going into this that I wanted more than 30 horsepower, obviously wanted a front end loader. I decided with a manual transmission instead of a hydro because I'm gonna be doing more pulling than anything else, and I'm comfortable with a manual transmission. And I wanted a support network near me. Now that immediately ruled out a lot of these, I don't want to call them off brands, but a lot of the less expensive brands. So I really came down to a Deere, a Kubota, or a New Holland. And in terms of doing your research, know about what these things cost. So I had to poke around quite a bit, but before I walked into any dealer lot, I knew what the list price of these different tractors are. And that's important because, you know, when you're spending a lot of money, you got to be educated. So point number 1, do your research, be educated, know what you need, and you know what you want is nice. I would have loved to have a bigger cab tractor with the works, but I don't really need that, and it really started to get astronomical pricing for me that I just wasn't interested in doing. So when I walked into any dealership, I knew exactly what to ask for. All right, so now you know what you want. The next question is, do you want to buy new versus used? And there are a lot of incentives right now to buy new. As I'm filming this, it's September of 2024. Most of the big brands are trying to get rid of inventory that's been sitting around for a while. There's a lot of 0% financing deals out there, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But candidly, when I looked at used tractors with low hours, the prices were prohibitive. And when I say prohibitive, you know, somebody with a machine like this looking to get $25,000 for it on the used market is going to have a problem. And when I say why, well, first of all, this is not my opinion. When I'm looking at these tractors, most of them have been listed for many, many months. It's harder to buy used. In most cases, you have to have the cash. And if you have the cash, you've got a lot of other flexibility in terms of buying new. If you get a loan, it's going to be a high interest rate. So I think the used market is really, really challenging. Now, what you might be able to get is a machine like this at a decent price with a couple of implements. But then the challenge that I found was getting the implements that I actually needed. So when I looked at the prices for new, again, between end of year incentives, 0% financing, and cash discounts, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, buying a new tractor to me was a better bet. Now, if you're going to go with a machine with higher hours or a little bit older, or maybe a machine from, you know, a brand that doesn't have local dealer support, you could probably save some money. But again, my bias was to go green. I had the money to actually pay cash, which helps out in a situation like this. And when I did the comparison, new versus used, new made a lot more sense for me to pursue first, so I did. All right, so the next thing for me was, do I pay cash or do I finance? And those 0% financing offers really, really sound good. Now, I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where I could pay cash for this machine, and that's an important negotiating factor. There's no question about it. But when I started to look into the 0% financing, now, in my personal opinion, it's not 0%. Here's why. Tractor might list for $35,000, but when you inquire, the cash price is significantly less than that. In some cases, $5,000 or even $10,000. So if you can walk in and pay cash for something, and yet if you want to finance it, it costs $5,000 or $10,000 more, well, they're calling that 0% financing, but the actual cost of the financing is now baked into the tractor itself. Now, I can't say that that's going to be true in every single case, but you need to think about that. So my advice would be, if you're going to go with a 0% financing deal, negotiate as though you're paying cash, settle on the price of the tractor, and then see if you can get 0% for that. If you can, fantastic. If not, it's not really 0%. All right, so my fourth point is pretty cut and dry. This is an in-person industry, and if you have a tractor or you're into farming, you know that already. But we're in an increasingly technology-based world, and as I was going through this process, got a lot of emails from some of the big brands. Hey, fill this out and we'll contact you. Hey, fill this out and we'll send you a price. Well, I'm going to say that 9 times out of 10, even more than that, I never got any response whatsoever. And the only time I did was when I got a follow-up from one of the 3 brands that I mentioned, asking me how my experience went with the dealer. And I said the dealer never contacted me, and then they did. Now, in the world today, most of us are used to buying things online. I've bought cars online. After figuring out exactly what I wanted to pay and finding the best deal was pretty easy. Tractors seem to be very different. The John Deere website will let you build and configure. And if you want to pay list price for something, fantastic. But to get the most bang for your buck, you need to go into the dealership and talk to somebody. Pretty straightforward, and it was important for me. And when I actually did that, once I was ready, I was able to get a really good deal on exactly what I needed. And so guys, my last point is also common sense. Once you're ready and you know what you want, bundle. Buy everything you can in one shot. You're going to be constrained by your budget, but figure that out going in. So I knew, besides just the tractor and the loader, that I wanted to get a box blade, a brush hog, pallet forks, and a snow pusher. So I put together a package deal, and that gave me the most negotiating power. Make sure you get what you need when you can. It applies to financing too, right? Because going back later to buy just one piece of equipment separate, you're going to pay more. You don't have that negotiating power. And again, this is really just common sense, but on a big purchase, it makes a lot of sense. So I talked about how to do your research. I talked about new versus used. I talked about cash versus financing. Talked about the fact that this is an in-person industry, and finally bundle everything together. Hopefully using that will help you on your journey to become a compact tractor owner. And if it does, congratulations, give me a like. If you're not subscribed and you like my content, subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and we'll see you with more tractor videos soon.